everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of the #1 comic podcast. This is the only podcast that is dedicated to the discussion and review of first issues. I'm your host, Jonah. My co-host with me, as always, is Bill. Bill, welcome back again for another round of episodes. Really appreciate this. I wanted to, before we even get into the issue today, which we are talking about, as you can see here, Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm super excited to talk about this.
Right.
But before we get into that, because this type of an issue takes me back in time to, I was, 10 years old when this thing came out, I believe, give or take. What was your comic book reading habits like as a child? Like, what were you reading? What were you into? I
was more into Spider-Man than anything else.
Okay.
Every once in a while, when my parents would go grocery shopping, I'd go over to the magazine section where they had the comics, and I'd look at the new stuff and be like, oh, that looks interesting or something, and I'd pick something out every once in a while. But like we've said before, the only experience I have for like comics a lot when I was a kid was trading cards.
Yeah.
So that's where I got most of my knowledge from.
100%. I was the same way. And that's where I even learned about these guys, was the trading cards. I saw Guardians of the Galaxy in trading card format first, and then just based on what I was reading there. And I think one of the things that really interested me was with some of the characters, one of the trading cards that showed like Charlie 27.
Yeah.
One of the characters, I was like, I thought he was just like badly drawn.
Yeah.
I was like, there's no way those are like his proportions, and that is his actual proportions. Right. And so
he kind of reminded me of Puck from Alpha Flight
a little bit
when I saw him, like just from the trading card
but with
picture,
like a blocky kind of square like head. He almost looks like a Minecraft character.
Yeah,
before Minecraft characters were a thing. So and I was very much the same way. Now, I was not a avid Spider-Man reader. I had picked up a couple of issues of Spider-Man. I was the kind of kid where if the cover caught my attention, I would buy it.
Absolutely.
So I think one of the first Spider-Man comics I bought was like him and Nova, and they were fighting like one of like the tricentennial robot things. And that was probably one of the first Spider-Man comics I picked up. And then the one I really remember picking up was like Spider-Man 361, the first appearance of Carnage.
Yeah.
I definitely remember buying that story arc of Spider-Man, but I was always really drawn to the more obscure characters, especially, and it wasn't just the street level characters, but I was a big like Cage fan, Ghost Rider, Darkhawk, Sleepwalker, which I know we talked about Sleepwalker previously. And these guys, were really out there. I don't recall if I ever, I don't recall seeing those issues on the stand.
I don't think I ever recall seeing one and being like, oh, I have to pick this up.
Yeah. Because, I wasn't until, it was probably 93 when I started paying attention to Guardians of the Galaxy and looking for back issues or picking up here and there. And I don't even have a full run of Guardians of the Galaxy yet. I'm still working on that. It's kind of one of those that I just kind of piece together slowly from dollar bins or as I come across them if I can get a good price on them, which I think I actually picked up. No, I was trying to think if I picked up a couple of copies today at the comic shop, but I don't think Guardians of the Galaxy was included in that.
Well, see, my thing was, like, I'd never delved into their backstory or anything like that, and then when James Gunn, the Guardians of the Galaxy movie was coming out, I was like, who the hell are these guys?
Yeah.
And I had no idea who they were.
That really, so one thing that I did get really into was the Annihilation series from like the mid 2000s when they brought back Nova. They brought back, they kind of redesigned or totally redid Drax from how he appeared in the 90s, which was kind of like a giant headed, green guy with.
See, I knew who Drax was from like the Infinity Watch, Infinity Crusade, all that stuff.
Yep. Yeah. And then they totally redesigned him.
Yeah.
Which is what they based the character in the movie on. So Dave Bautista looked like that version of Drax versus the 90s version of Drax.
Yeah.
And it was also interesting, too, because the movie, even though it had this new set of characters, there were some incorporations of these characters in those movies.
Right.
But almost only in name only. There wasn't really a lot of likenesses because Yondu is a completely different character in the movies than really he was in this series,
right?
As we'll talk a little bit about.
Well, and I had known too, which I'm sure we'll get into. This is set way into like an alternate future of the Marvel.
Yeah, this is like completely
universe.
different versions of those characters anyway, for the most part.
Right.
But yeah, I'm sure we'll talk more about that as well. Before we get into the issue itself, special thanks to everyone at the Field of Geeks Network for helping make this happen. Special thanks to Raven X for the intro music. If you like the videos, be sure to like us on YouTube, follow us on Facebook at the Number One Comics Podcast, and yeah, we try to launch a new issue every week. It doesn't always happen or episode every week. It doesn't always happen that way, but we certainly try. One thing too, I was going to ask you about, because you mentioned being a Spider-Man guy. They're launching a new Amazing Spider-Man #1 in a couple of months. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll talk about that issue, because we did the Untold Tales of Spider-Man, but we haven't really talked a lot about Spider-Man, and so I want to incorporate definitely talk about Spider-Man some more, because I'm still learning a lot more about that character as we go.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're not talking about Spider-Man today. We are talking about Guardians of the Galaxy. This was published by Marvel Comics. Cover date on it, June of 1990. Like I said, that was the month I turned 10 years old. This was probably out a few months before that, I would believe. If it's got that cover date, it probably came out in March or April, something like that.
Right.
Cover price on it, is it $2? $1? What is it? $1 cover price.
Yeah.
Man, those were the days. You could walk into a comic shop and buy a comic book for $1.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you? I mean, I would pick up everything for $1. So yeah, $1 cover price. Jim Valentino was the writer and the artist on this, who, he went on to be one of the founding members of Image Comics with his Shadowhawk character.
Loved Shadowhawk.
Dude, Shadowhawk, people will call him like Tumu Wolverine or Wish.com Wolverine. Shadowhawk was badass.
Yeah.
He looked cool. He broke people's spines. He got AIDS from a blood transfusion, not from being gay. They made a weird point about that, if I recall, which was a very sign of the times, I think.
You talk about issues that I picked up just because of what the cover looked like. I think that's how I picked up the first issue of Shadowhawk.
We'll be talking about Shadowhawk at some point. So I was a big Jim Valentino fan. Now, early 90s, Marvel saw a slew of new characters and new comics that had hit the stands. Again, we were talking characters like Sleepwalker, Darkhawk. Those were brand new characters at the time. And then there was also this resurgence of these existing characters. Like Ghost Rider was an existing character. Guardians of the Galaxy were existing characters. I did not even know that.
No, I didn't know that either.
In fact, I don't think I knew that for years.
Yeah.
To me, these were brand new characters. But they first appeared as a team back in Marvel Superheroes issue 18. That was back in 1969.
Really?
So they've been around for a long time at that point, right?
Okay.
Now, after they appeared, they really didn't do much until about 5 years later. They next appeared in a series called Marvel 2-in-1. They had kind of a stretch of issues in Marvel 2-in-1. They were given their own series, sort of, in 1976 in Marvel Presents. And that ran, basically they were featured from issue 3 through 12. I believe in that. Now, I've not read any of those old Guardians of the Galaxy stories. I just know kind of what I've researched online to learn about them. They had a few guest appearances kind of up through 1980, but then they largely disappeared. And it was in the Marvel 2-in-1 69 that had changed their story a little bit, in which the Guardians were basically separated from the mainstream Marvel universe and began existing in this alternate timeline, which is where this takes place. So like I said, they disappeared for about a decade. It was in 1989 that Marvel editor-in-chief Tom DeFalco, he wanted to revive the concept and was working on an idea. He learned, though, of a proposal that Jim Valentino had been working on, which was utilizing the original members, and DeFalco basically gave Valentino the green light to run with that. So let's take a look kind of inside this. The first thing I want to point out is the cover. Beautiful cover art where you got kind of the characters running into action, and all the characters are featured prominently there. The series itself, or the issue rather itself, it opens up in the year 3017. and our team is on the planet Korg. I believe it's going to be pronounced Courg. They find themselves being assaulted by an emplacement of gun turrets that just kind of popped up out of nowhere. So the team's working to take out the guns. And as they're going through this, we're introduced to each one of the members, and we're given a real quick rundown on who each member is, where they come from, and what their abilities are. It's a really clean, simple way to, again, to me, what was brand new characters, introduce us to these new characters, or reintroduce you to characters if you'd learned about them previously, I guess.
Right.
The cast includes Starhawk, which is a mutant from the planet Arcturus. He's got the power of light. You've got Starhawk also shares a physical body, so to speak, with his wife Alita, which sounds weird, but okay. He also has a secret of being known as, quote unquote, the one who knows. And that's alluded to a few times in the issue, but they don't really kind of like tell you give you much about that.
Right.
And at the time, reading this first issue, I'm like, does he call himself that? Or is he just like, I'm the guy who knows, and then that's how you're known as? Or is that what other people have referred to him as? You've got Charlie 27, who we'd mentioned before. He's the last survivor of an Earth colony on Jupiter. And because he was designed to live on Jupiter, he's got super strength. He can withstand 11 times the gravity of Earth. Not 12, just 11 times the gravity of Earth. That's important to note.
Yeah.
And he's one of the more interesting looking characters. Like I said, he's the one that looks like completely disproportionate.
Yeah.
But when you kind of find out that backstory about him, you understand why.
Right.
There's Martin X, or Marty for short. He's from a colony on Pluto, and he is the master over kind of thermal energy. And he's got a silicon-celled body, which gives him a diamond-like appearance. He's very cool looking. Yondu is from Centauri 4. He's a primitive mystic and an expert with ancient weapons, like his Yaka arrow, which he can control with a whistle. That is probably the only, in my opinion, one of the only carryovers to those Guardians movies.
Yeah.
Was his use of that weapon.
Yeah.
Because this Yondu is much different of a character than what you get from Michael Rooker's version.
Looks like something out of Conan or something like that, like a futuristic Conan kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%. He very much, he reminds me of kind of like the Native American mystic. Like, have you ever seen the movie?
Like the shaman character.
The shaman character, or the sidekick in Brotherhood of the Wolf.
Yeah.
Is kind of what it reminds me of.
Yeah.
Which, if you guys have not seen Brotherhood of the Wolf, that's a great movie. We also have Nikki. She's from a colony on Mercury. She's got excellent agility and is a skilled marksman, or markswoman, probably more appropriately. And then lastly, we have Major Vance Astro. He's the first Earthman to the stars, and he's the last survivor of the 20th century. His body is sheathed in a silver and black metal suit to preserve his life, and his mutant ability is that of psychokinesis. And weirdly enough, Vance Astro also, around the same time, is essentially the same character from the New Warriors Marvel Boy. So that's really the team in a nutshell. So they're working together. They are able to destroy the gun emplacements. The destroyed weapon sends off a distress signal into space, where it reaches a being called Taserface. It's worth repeating. The villain's name in this issue is called Taserface.
Yes.
Something about me, especially thinking back to when I was a child creating my own comic characters, they all had names like that. And so I kind of love that, especially when you find out that Taserface was actually named by Jim Valentino's young son at the time. His son's name was Aaron. He's the one that gave Taserface his name. So
That's
I think back
awesome.
to like 10-year-old me, I would have probably had a Taserface.
That's awesome.
As well. I think that was fantastic. Yeah. Back on Korg, the Guardians attempt to make communication. They attempt to communicate with the indigenous population, but one of them attacks Yondu, forcing him to defend himself. Realizing the locals will be of no help to him, Martin X and Yondu beam themselves back to their ship to double check that they're even in the right place. On the planet, Vance wants to hunt for the clue, revealing what they're seeking is a shield. Charlie 27, he flirts with Nikki. Those two are into each other. And Starhawk works to transform his physical form back to Alita. And it sounds like the team prefers Alita anyway. Like, it sounds like the kind of the male version of Starhawk's a dick, and they like the wife better.
Right.
On board the Guardian's ship, Martin X interrupts Yondu in prayer, and Yondu asks Marty to sit by his fire, gaze into it, and tell Yondu what he sees. And what Martin X sees are bits and pieces of their history as the Guardians of the Galaxy. From them getting together to battle the Badoon, teaming up with Captain America and the Thing, finding Nikki, the deaths of Starhawk and Alita's children, teaming up with Thor, battling Korvac with the Avengers, a team up with Spider-Man, Warlock, and the event that led them to their alternate future timeline. These are all things that happened in those previous comics that I'd mentioned. And again, when I started reading this, or when I'd found this issue, I was probably mid-teens. I still had no idea that those things actually happened. I thought it was literally just giving this team history, like injecting them into Marvel's history,
Right.
Without realizing that they were really recapping us on all of the issues, all of their appearances, over the last 2 decades or 3 decades before that.
Yeah.
Which is I think it's a really cool way of doing that.
Yeah.
And tying it in with sort of the overall story. That fire page recap, like I said, it catches us up as the reader on the team's entire history, which is very smartly done. Yondu and Marty teleport back down to Korg, where they meet up with the team. Marty informs or confirms for Vance that they are in the right place. Vance decides that someone else, or he figures out someone else may also be looking for the shield as well, and that whoever that is, they might actually be a step ahead of them. That meeting is abruptly interrupted by the sudden appearance of Taserface. Taserface blasts Vance. Charlie 27 rushes him, but Charlie's also zapped by the attacker. Yondu uses his Yaka arrow to swarm Taserface, distracting him, which allows Nikki to fire on him with her wrist blasters. Taserface turns his attention to her, but she easily dodges his weapon fire. Yondu's not so lucky. He gets hit. Charlie 27 gets back to his feet while Martin X pleads with Alita to transform back into Starhawk because they need his power, which that sounds kind of sexist, but whatever. Charlie 27 slams his body into Taserface as Starhawk joins the battle. On Starhawk's command, Charlie 27 puts Taserface in a half Nelson. Taserface is not completely helpless as he emits a zap of electromagnetic energy at Starhawk. I think I can't remember, it comes right out of his face, so it's like they don't call him Taserface for nothing.
Right.
Might even be a line in the book, but Martin X blasts Taserface with a beam of freezing cold, which encases the Taserface in kind of a big block of ice around his head, and then Vance Astro blasts him with a psychokinetic energy right at the dome. Taserface falls. His defeat is immediately kind of communicated to his people, and their ship kind of heads to Korg to investigate. So he goes down. These other people who he works for or is part of, they're notified of it. The team regroups, and they check to take a closer look at their fallen enemy. Vance Astro does note that his weaponry and armor is very reminiscent of Iron Man's. The team is suddenly surprised by a new arrival, or arrivals, rather. It is an army of beings like Taserface, and they identify themselves as the Stark. Let's go into our thoughts, reviews.
Right.
What was your take on this issue?
Well, I had to, of course, being a fan of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, I thought it was hilarious when we see Taserface because that was such a joke in the second one.
Yes.
And he actually shoots tasers from his face, basically.
Yep.
So that was pretty cool.
Was that what James Gunn's brother's character name was, or who played Taser? There was a Taserface reference in the movies.
There was, and he was like kind of the guy that led the mutiny against Yondu.
Okay.
But I know that was a big joke. Like Rocket was like, "Oh, you know what would be a really kick-ass name? Taserface."
Right.
But yeah, he actually kind of like shoots a taser blast from his face, which I think is pretty cool.
Yep.
Also, they have that reference to the Stark. It's almost like there's kind of a there's definitely that influence from the 20th century heroes.
Yeah,
in this story.
I think what you find out, and I don't know if it's in issue 2 or in kind of one of the subsequent, issues of this story arc is this group, they basically worship Stark as like a god. I think they've even got like a statue of him on their home planet, and they're
basically using Stark technology
as their weapons. Yeah, so they've kind of deified him.
Well, and I don't know if it was like it's very heavily hinted that the shield they're looking for is Cap's shield, right?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
I think that even if that wasn't, because I don't think it was explicitly stated here, but when in the Marvel universe, when you hear shield, I mean, that's where my head went immediately. Is like, okay, they're looking for.
Yeah, it's like if they were looking for a hammer, you'd assume it was Mjolnir.
Yes, correct. Yeah. I really dug this issue. I dug this whole series, at least the majority of it, I should say. And when most people think about Guardians of the Galaxy, they're going right to Rocket, Groot, Drax. They're thinking of those movie characters. They're thinking of Chris Pratt. This original version of the team goes largely forgotten. And again, they are referenced in the movies. So like Sylvester Stallone plays Starhawk.
Right.
But again, it's really kind of just in name only. And in fact, Charlie 27... Martin X, they do make a cameo appearance in the kind of the post credits of Guardians 2, I think it is.
Yeah. Like I think was it Michael Clark Duncan?
Yes.
Or Ving Rhames, one of the two.
Ving Rhames.
Plays Charlie 27.
Correct. Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was really cool. Like that's again, I never knew until reading this for this episode, never knew anything about the original Guardians of the Galaxy, and let alone that they go back to the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, and I think just the fact that these guys are they're relatively obscure makes me just such more of a fan of it. I think it was issue 14 that I'd first picked up of this title, and that's only because it had Ghost Rider on the cover of it.
Oh, okay.
Because as a kid, I wasn't chasing creators. I wasn't after the writers or the artists. It was like you threw a certain character on a cover. And Ghost Rider was on the cover of a lot of shit in the mid 90s, and so I was picking up just a lot of random stuff.
Well, that's the way I was too. If Spider-Man made a cameo in it, I was picking it up.
That was a safe bet in most of those 90s issues as well. Yeah. Like I said, issue 14 was the first one I picked up, and I've largely gone and filled in a lot of the holes of the missing issues. I think there's probably 7 issues I still need to have a complete run. As a standalone issue, I think this is a really good example of how a first issue can be done.
Oh yeah,
because within one page, you're introduced to all the characters, what their name is, where they're from, who they are. They all look incredibly different, so you're not going to mix up any of them necessarily. You get the kind of the 3 or 4 page recap of the history, which I think is really good, especially considering it'd been like a decade since anyone had even seen these characters around.
Right.
And so we're introduced to them as if they're new. We're given that history, which is awesome. You get that in-story catch-up of their, like I said, that entire history, their past appearances in the Marvel Universe. So it makes it really accessible for new readers.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a few teams, groups of characters that you can come out with a new number one and not have to really explain much. I think of like Justice League, the Avengers, but there's so many other groups out there where you do need to know kind of who they are going into it or what what they're about.
Yeah.
And so this issue does an excellent job of making it easily accessible for old readers or people who knew these characters before and brand new to readers, which I think was excellent.
Yeah.
As for the characters themselves, we're given some really unique designs they're straight out of the Silver Age, which I really like. And I think one of the things that was interesting to me, if I think back, and maybe why I didn't notice this book until you throw Ghost Rider on the cover of it, is because even in the 90s, they still have a very Silver Age-esque design.
They do.
They did not look like 90s characters.
Yeah.
And that might have 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old me probably didn't really give them much attention or notice because of that. So it might have been, I don't know if it was a detriment to them to have those designs. I think in retrospect, looking back on it, I really like that. But at the time, it was probably why I didn't really notice this book.
Yeah.
There are familiar tropes, like, you've got the muscular brawler in Charlie 27, you've got the mystical warrior in Yondu. So you do have some tropes in there, which you can't blame Valentino for that because he's using existing characters that were created by, somebody else.
Yeah.
We are given like snippets of their mission through the dialogue. It's a way that's organic. We're introduced to this new threat with, not just Taserface, but with the Stark. The last page where the Stark shows up, it does make me want to like pick up the next issue to see what happens next. Like, how do they get out of this? Is there a fight? What does this look like? Overall, I think it was a great first issue. It does a really good job of introducing us to this new, introducing a new generation of readers to a not necessarily a new team, but an existing team.
Right.
So I really dug it. Any other thoughts review-wise? And we'll talk a little bit about what came next.
I would say that probably then I may not have picked this up and read the entire run. Now I probably would go back and read it.
Yeah.
And I think what's even cooler about this is that, a lot of people have their own interpretation of Guardians of the Galaxy, whether it be from the films, whether it be from this comic. There's several different iterations of the team throughout Marvel history as well.
Yeah, you've got a little something for everybody, so to speak, where people will be like, it's not my Guardians.
Yeah.
When it comes to the newer version or maybe the older version.
Yeah.
So this series actually ran for 62 issues and
That's
ended
not bad
in
for
July of
90s.
95. No, I mean, we talked about Sleepwalker. That ran for, 31 issues? 33 issues, something like that. It didn't quite have the Punisher run or the Ghost Rider run, which was probably smart because some of those issues ran way longer than they probably should have in retrospect.
Right.
Especially when you get into like the late 90s and the art was terrible and the stories were not good for the most part. So Valentino, he had the first 50 issues plotted. Okay. But he was removed from the book when he went on to co-found Image Comics. And Michael Gallagher took over the title with issue 29. And he then kind of stayed with it until its end. I don't know how much different Michael Gallagher's story was compared to what Valentino had planned. And I would be really interested to learn more about what issue 30 through 50 would have looked like if Valentino had stayed with it.
Yeah.
I'd be really interested to see that.
Well, you always get that a lot with, whether it be comic books or whether it be movies, a certain director or a certain writer will have their vision for where they see it ending. And then somebody else takes over and it completely, just goes out the window.
You see it with not just comics. You see that with movies as well.
Yeah.
You see that all the time, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I would be really interested to see what that looked like. There was a 4-issue spin-off miniseries in 1994 called Galactic Guardians, which I just, as of like a week ago, finished completing that 4-issue series.
Oh, okay.
So we've got all of those. I haven't read them yet, but I did go in and pick those up. A new Guardians team, as we talked about, was assembled in 2008. That was born out of the awesome Annihilation event. Did you read any of Annihilation?
I didn't.
So
I know kind of the synopsis of it.
Real quick summary. Annihilus is this mechanical insectoid being, I think from the negative zone, who basically took out, half the universe in what's called the Annihilation Wave. He took out like the entire Nova Corps, which made Nova that much of a cooler character. But yeah, if anyone out there has not read the Annihilation event, I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic series. And it was really the first time that I felt Marvel really took their cosmic characters seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, you had a little bit of it with, the Infinity Watch, with this Guardians run, but there was so much much more out there that was just largely untapped, and that series kind of did a really good job of tapping into it.
Yep.
That team that was kind of came about in 2008 and consisted of characters like Star-Lord, Rocket Raccoon, Groot, and Drax. So a lot of the characters that we know today. And that, like I said, or we had said, that team was the basis for the characters that were featured in the MCU Guardians franchise. That first ongoing ran for 25 issues. They reappeared as part of the Marvel Now branding. That series ran for 28 issues. So there's been sort of a variation of the Guardians kind of around since the mid-2000s.
Now, this iteration of the Guardians, have they shown up in any of the feature titles?
Yeah, I've got issues. There was an issue where even like Vance Astro came back as a guest. So yeah, some of those characters have returned to the proper kind of Marvel 616 universe, so to speak. There was another Guardians launch with, Marvel did another rebranding following Marvel Now, which was called All New, All Different Marvel. That series relaunched Guardians. That one had the same basic creative team as the previous Marvel Now launch, so it wasn't really all new or all different, unfortunately. I don't think I'd read any of that one. Now that because Marvel Now and then that following rebrand was kind of like during this lull where I was not reading comics. So I don't think I've read much of it. As much as I like Abnett and Lanning's run in the mid-2000s, I wasn't a big fan of what Bendis had done. I read a little bit of that and wasn't digging it as much. And I think it was Bendis that was doing the Marvel Now and the all new, all different phases.
Right.
I like the newer cast quite a bit, but I'd love to see these original characters return in a big way, not just as a cameo here or there.
Yeah.
I'd love to see an actual mini-series or a new series with these guys. I think that'd be fantastic.
That'd be cool.
So, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I don't think so.
Excellent. Again, check out Guardians of the Galaxy. Even as it's a great first issue. It's a great jumping on point if you want to go back and read it. I highly recommend it. Excellent. I love this book. That's going to do us for this episode. Thank you guys for joining us. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Apple Podcasts or underneath the Field of Geeks banner. So just look up Field of Geeks and you'll find our episodes there. You will also be able to find us on Facebook at the Number One Comics Podcast on Facebook. You can email us at the Number One Comic Podcast at gmail.com. I don't know why I made it such a long stupid email.
That's all right.
I might it might explain why we get 0 emails.
You know what? At least it's all one word. There's no underscores.
There's no underscores.
Yeah.
All one word. I'll probably have to rethink that at some point. Again, special thanks to everyone at the Field of Geeks for helping make this happen. Special thanks to, again, Raven X. Any other things we want to throw out there? I always feel like there's something I'm missing at the end of these.
I think that's about it.
All right, perfect. All right. Well, join us next week for an all-new episode. We'll see you then. Take care.